Joining me today is the founder of the American Conservation Coalition, an organization committed to efficient, effective, conservative environmentalism, #Green GOP. Benji Backer, welcome to the Rubin Report.
It's great to be here.
I feel you are long overdue, even though 20 years old, you didn't have a lot of time to get here, but you got here. We've met a couple times. I kind of found out about you a couple years ago. We're going to talk about what kind of put you on the map in the political world and got your activism going and all that. But it's good to have you here. I like that you dressed ready for the part.
Oh yeah, you gotta look good to feel good.
All right, so you have a really interesting story of what got you in this mix. But first, I just thought I'd like to ask my guests, just kind of tell me a little bit about your upbringing, family, that kind of thing. Yeah,
so I grew up in a family of 5, completely non-political. Very close family. We traveled a lot together. Youngest, I had 2 older sisters. My parents were actually entrepreneurs. They started a business when I was, I want to say 10, which was a software company based on mortgages, and it really started to take off. But it was during the recession, and it was a really bold move for that time, and it really paid off, and they're now retired and kind of lived the American dream, which was a really cool thing to be brought up by.
Yeah. What about the politics at home? Were you guys always kind of conservative or didn't talk about it that much?
So actually, we've got really differing views. My sister is a liberal, one of them, and then one of them is more just not into it very much. My parents are conservative, but they never told us really about their views. They wanted us to decide for ourselves. Obviously, their morals and values, I think, played into how I feel about things, but it was never forced upon us, or they were not adamant about politics or volunteered or donated, to my knowledge, to campaigns. So it really wasn't talked about in the house. You know, they'd have the debates on, or they'd have the news on, but nothing really more than that. So I was able to figure out my opinions for myself when I was a little bit earlier than most people, when I was 10, but yeah.
10? What kind of opinions does a 10-year-old have?
Well, I was watching the John McCain-Obama debates, which...
At 10 years old?
Yes, at 10 years old, and I found it really interesting, and I wanted to figure out where I stood on the spectrum of would I support John McCain or would I support, I think, Senator Obama at the time.
Yeah.
And so I looked up online kind of just a basic outline of what each side believed in, and I figured out that I was conservative. And so for the next couple of years, I forced my parents to put signs in our yard for John McCain. I forced them to put bumper stickers on our cars. I put bumper stickers on my ripstick.
What did your parents think about this? They're 10-year-olds.
They're like, all right, we'll support you in whatever you do. But they were very, I mean, I think that they were surprised. I mean, I don't know if any parent thinks that their 10-year-old kid is going to get super interested in politics, because it doesn't really affect you at 10 years old. It doesn't really affect you until after college, really. So that was kind of a surprise to them, but they were supportive. They let me, research as much as I wanted to, and again, they allowed me to put the signs in the yard, the bumper stickers on my ripstick, that type of thing. Right. So it was a pretty cool time, and then I got injured and decided to volunteer because I couldn't play sports. So.
All right, so I want to get to that in a sec, but wait, I just want to picture this. 10 years old, you're watching the debate. I assume you were watching with your folks, probably. Or,
yeah,
right. Okay. You go online to figure out the issues. What mattered to you at 10 years old that you said at the end of it, okay, I'm a conservative, or I'm going to vote for McCain?
Well, my parents were always really fiscally conservative with just how they spent money. We were never like in a really, really tough position when I was super young, but we always were saying, buy the cheapest product you can, save as much money as you can, and that was something that I was brought up with, so that really mattered to me. And knowing that the government could take away my parents' hard-earned money, and knowing that the government could come in and harm my dad's business by putting a ton of restrictions, that kind of struck me pretty harshly. And then also, my family, we were raised on family values, right? Close-knit family, it kind of happens that way. So those 2 things were kind of the main drivers, I would say.
Yeah, it's just hard to imagine a 10-year-old thinking of these things, but it's pretty cool, and it explains why you're here right now. So, okay, what put you on the map, and when I found out about you, and I think nationally when people found out about you, and now this makes sense now that I know that this was brewing at 10 years old. 2013, you're 15 years old.
Yep.
What happens?
Yeah, so I had been active in politics for 3 years before that.
And what does that even mean?
I was volunteering on Scott Walker's campaign, Senator Ron Johnson's campaign. I helped out Mitt Romney as well in 2012, and
Could people believe it? Sorry to interrupt, but could people even believe it? Like, here's this 12-year-old kid, 11-year-old kid working on these campaigns?
It was actually really funny. The first campaign I ever worked on didn't let me use the phones at first because they could, when you're talking to a 12-year-old on the phone, you can tell it's like, hi, is Michael there? And they're like, yeah, but like, who are you? And why are you 12? And why are you calling me from a congressional office or congressional campaign? And so people were actually really surprised. Conservatives were really supportive. They're like, whoa, look at this 12-year-old kid who's volunteering for us. And then the left is like, why is this 12-year-old kid volunteering for them? So it was pretty funny. And I was injured, so I needed something to do. And like any 12-year-old, I decided to volunteer for politics. Very normal thing to do.
Yes, very average.
So yeah, it was a very interesting dynamic because—
Wait, this is also hilarious that an injury got you into politics. What kind of injury? What are we talking
It was an ankle injury that the doctors couldn't figure out. I was on crutches for a year and a half.
Wow.
Gained a lot of weight. It was during middle school, which does not help.
Yeah.
Because those are the worst years for that anyways. And so then, again, I went into the congressional office and they didn't want me to do the phones. They didn't want me to go door to door. Because imagine a 12-year-old coming to your door and be like, hey, you should vote for X, Y, or Z. And you're like, why should I trust a 12-year-old, right? So it was a very interesting dynamic at that age.
So, all right, so now what puts you on the map? 2013, you're 15 years old. Something happens.
Yes. So in high school, early on in high school and middle school, teachers had really come after me for my political views because I was starting to make local headlines for my activism, especially in the recall election for Scott Walker in 2012. So
Tell me a little bit about what your opinions were and what your teachers were.
Yeah, so I was a really pro Scott Walker guy. I actually ended up becoming close with his family and him, and a great guy, and even better policies. I talked to a lot of teachers who were sick of being forced to join unions and sick of starting out with $30,000 base pay when senior teachers were making $100,000 with benefits, and it took them 40 years to get to that level, even if they were a better teacher. So people were really kind of sick of that. But it was a very small minority because the unions really had a lot of brainwashing in the state, and I'm sure in other states as well. And so my view is that Scott Walker was really helping out the state because he helped balance the budget and he kind of freed the teachers up and helped their pay become more of a fair shake. But the teachers did not like that, the majority of them. I mean, most people know of the huge uprising that happened, the protests, hundreds of thousands of people, death threats to every Republican in the state legislature and the governor. And so the teachers would leave school, they protested, they'd take leave, they would cry in class. I mean, it was pretty insane.
Yeah.
And then, you have me over here, bold little Benji, going out there and saying, ooh, rah, rah, Scott Walker. They did not like that at all. So they would say pretty disparaging things to me in class in front of my fellow students.
What kind of things would they say to you?
They would attack my family for being business owners and saying that they were lazy and saying that I was racist.
Yeah, a lot of lazy business owners. That's the key to business, isn't it? Yeah.
They assume that my parents golfed every Friday. By the way, my parents don't know how to golf, so that's not true. I don't even know how to golf, and so that was one thing that they would always say, and they would call me racist or weird for being in politics at such a young age.
What's that like for a kid of that age to be dealing with that? It's one thing to be outspoken, but now your teachers, your authority figures, are attacking you publicly in school.
It actually strengthened me because at first I was pretty taken aback and I was kind of sad about it. But my parents really pushed me on and said, you're doing the right thing, and just kind of block out, as the millennials say, block out the haters.
Yeah.
So I didn't really care that much as long as it didn't affect my grades or how my classmates viewed me, because I do care about the people that I am friends with. So that was kind of frustrating. But after a while, I just kind of got used to it because it would happen in a class every single quarter of every single semester of every single year from 7th grade until I started coming out nationally about this issue.
Did it ever affect your grades? Because I could see a teacher in a subjective class, maybe not math where it would be tough to screw with your grades, but a social studies teacher where you're writing an essay, or an English teacher or something, actually harming your grades.
It did actually. My lowest grade ever was in a social studies class in middle school. I've never gotten anything really below like a high B level, and I got a D plus in that social studies class. It's middle school, so at that point it was middle school, so it didn't really matter per se, but you could see that there was a trend going, and that I'd be worried in future years whether or not that would affect me. And in other classes, I don't think it did as much, which is good. But in that class, I did see, I mean, it's a pretty obvious correlation between me getting good grades in every class since then and every class before then, and then getting a D+ in that class, which is kind of weird.
And also probably not a coincidence that social studies is the class that you were probably talking about this stuff the most, right? Did you try to fight the teacher on that? Did your folks get involved or anything?
I actually ended up switching schools.
Wow, I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, so that was a big change. It actually ended up being for the better, because the school I switched to was the feeder school to the high school that I was going to. So I ended up making better connections there, but it was an annoying change that shouldn't have been necessary. And it was a teacher who had a history of these types of behaviors, not just on politics, but on other things. So
it's interesting because you were fighting the unions, which in your estimation was actually pro-teacher because you felt the unions were too powerful. Meanwhile, you have teachers fighting you, which is really only feeding your initial premise in the first place.
Yeah, so that was it really enhanced my opinion on the subject. It made me really want to push further, because I could tell that some of these teachers were really worried about their job or their job security, because they knew that they could actually be held accountable now. And some of the senior teachers knew that, oh, I actually have to perform well to get paid well. My age isn't just the deciding factor.
Yeah.
So I think that's why people came out so strongly in certain areas. Some people just didn't really understand the full scope of the situation and calmed down once they figured that out. But some, I think, were really worried about their future pay, because they had kind of just been relaxed for the last 20 years since their pay had gone up.
Right, so basically they weren't doing a great job, and this isn't just unique to Wisconsin. This is happening all over America, where you have these teachers that have been at it forever, have kind of given up or are not working that hard anymore, but they're protected by the unions, their salaries keep going up, they get great benefits, et cetera, et cetera. That's what you're fighting, and you're seeing the fruits of what happens with that as they're cracking down on you. So what actually put you on? What was the specific incident that put this all in motion? Yeah,
so I kind of took all the information that I had of all the experiences that I had gone through and wrote it up in a blog for FreedomWorks. It ended up going to Drudge, and then Todd Starnes at Fox wrote something up about it. Town Hall had something. It started to get in that space. And then eventually Megyn Kelly's show reached out to ask me to come on and talk about it. So that kind of put me on the map there. And then I started to be invited to conferences to speak about my experience and kind of how other young conservatives shouldn't be scared to speak out in the classroom, even if their teachers or other fellow students come after them. It wasn't easy because it was my sophomore year of high school, actually end of my freshman year of high school, and after that Fox News interview, I received death threats. People were threatening me at school because some of the teachers that I had called out, which I never named their names, but I called them out. They were popular with the students, so people weren't happy about it. So it was not an easy time for my family either.
Yeah, I want to focus on that a little bit, because I think because everyone gets this these days. I mean, this is one of the themes of what we do here, is everyone's just like afraid to say anything because they don't want to deal with just the hate they get on Twitter, and you got plenty of that, and that's how I found you after this. But the other stuff, like you had to go to school the next day. So literally, what is that like?
Well, I don't know if I've ever said this publicly, but I carried a knife to school because I was so scared with my life, and I didn't tell my parents. I had a friend give it to me that was worried about my safety. It was a pretty hard time because no matter if people think I was doing something right or wrong, I think part of the problem with our culture, and it was the same way 4 years ago or 5 years ago, is that if someone's doing something that you don't agree with, you're just going to completely attack them wholeheartedly without any respect for what they're doing or their opinions or anything like that. And so I was honestly scared for my life. You know, I couldn't go anywhere. I got my bike stolen when I biked to an ice cream shop. And I live in a very safe place, and it was somebody from my high school that just really didn't like me.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be walking my dogs, and someone would flip me off and say, F you, Benji Backer, you know, suck a whatever.
What about your family at that time? Because I know you said your folks were always backing you and telling you to do what you believe in. Was there any repercussions for them or their business or anything like that?
No, their business was fine. I think, you know, most adults who knew what was going on treated me with a lot of respect. I think it was mostly the young people who were a little bit ignorant about what was going on. So my parents didn't have any negative repercussions that I know of. Again, they might have been not telling me because they didn't want to make it any worse for me because they know that I care about them. So that was that was a tough time for them, though, because they live through their kids, and having something like that be constantly going after, people constantly going after your son is not the greatest thing in the world, especially when they know that what you're doing is right. So they were kind of my biggest supporters at the time, telling me to keep pushing on and, again, block out the haters and just kind of and do what you think is right, because at the end of the day, people are going to realize it eventually. And I had tons of people come up to me years afterwards and apologize and realize that what they did was immature. People who said the worst things to me or told me to kill myself or whatever, those people would come up to me and say, "I'm really sorry," because as people mature, they start to realize that that's not okay dialogue, even if you totally disagree with someone. So
yeah, sadly, we have a lot of people who don't mature these days, but that is
Right.
nice to hear, though. What about the support you got from your friends? I mean, were your friends that supported you willing to publicly support you? Because that's another. See, that's another. There are certain things. That's why I think this is so interesting. There are certain trends with all of these. Whether it's you taking an unpopular but principled position, or it's a guy like Brett Weinstein at Evergreen.
Right.
Just all these different people that come out. I mean, it's a coming out in a way. That the same tactics happen every time. And in this case, the idea that your friends or whatever won't back you publicly, but privately probably had no problem doing it. Yeah,
I had friends who came up to me or would text me saying, "I support you and I feel terrible for what you're going through, but I can't associate myself with you." And those friends ended up trying to associate with me later on.
In a way, those are the worst ones, right? Because it's like if someone just tells you to go F yourself, it's like, big deal, okay, whatever. But the friends, it's like, am I your shield? Am I, you know what I mean? Like, am I the guy that's supposed to just be out there while you sit quietly and do nothing? You're not helping me.
Right. Yeah, I had one really good friend named Brandon who supported me through it all and would come over this death threat stuff started to happen right as summer started. Which was the worst time, because in high school as a freshman, you don't really do anything during the summer, so you're just like at home sitting, looking at your Twitter thinking, oh, all these people want to kill me, or they think I'm the worst person in the world. So it's really nice to have one friend who I could rely on, plus my family. Yeah. And I actually took a little bit of a break from the town that I lived in. My dad even said, if things got worse, that we could move. If that was necessary, which I never thought it was going to be necessary, and it never was. But I took a little bit of a break and went to my grandparents' house for a while just to get away from it all. Because there was one time actually at my house two times. Once when someone called and said they were going to come to my house and kill me on an anonymous line to my home phone. And then a second time when I was watching a movie and it was actually Ted, and I was trying to have a fun night after all this stuff had been going on, and someone knocked on the window and was flipping me off, and this was in the middle of the night as I was sitting in my living room. So I was pretty scared to be at home for a little while, and so I went away for a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't want to belabor the point with you, and there's a lot of other obviously important stuff I want to talk about, but I think that it's worth mentioning just because so many people go through this, and more importantly, you're on the other side now. Yep. You made it, you're doing cool stuff, and you survived. And it's just worth showing people that, usually you will survive.
Yeah, and I think, what was really big for me is that it takes a strong person to go through that, but there are tons of people going through the exact same thing nationwide. And I would even say that there are some people on the left side who go through the exact same thing, because it's not just people on the left who have this nasty attitude. It's people on the right as well. And I think it's sickening, because even if you disagree with someone wholeheartedly, just stay quiet. If you really are going to be that rude and that upset about it, be respectful or be quiet. That's kind of how I would like to view things. And so I think to other people who are in similar situations, persevering through this is the best thing that you can go through. I mean, I feel like I matured into a 45 or 50-year-old when I was 14 or 15 years old. And so I was able to really progress, and I think it actually might be one of the best experiences of my life, even though it was one of the worst experiences of my life. In terms of furthering myself, it was one of the best. And I also think just knowing that if I can persevere through it, anyone can, and anyone should. And standing up for your viewpoints isn't going to be easy, but it's totally worth it.
Well said. You know, I think we talked about this one. We had lunch a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I think we talked about this, but I told you that I think my best professional moment is also my worst professional moment, and it was when Larry Elder just bludgeoned me over the head with facts. And it was my worst because I wasn't prepared, and it was my best because it opened me up.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, new information, new facts, let's explore that.
Right.
So yeah, getting through something is pretty beautiful. Not that I'm comparing that moment with Larry to
No,
everything
all,
that you
but
went
it's all
through.
related. Yeah. And I think what I found is that it actually, what I did opened up the eyes of a lot of the people who attacked me, right? They eventually apologized. And if they wouldn't have attacked me and apologized, they wouldn't have opened their minds either. You know, a couple years later, they're probably thinking back like, oh, wow, you know, that was really terrible of me. But would they ever have thought about that? If that wouldn't have happened, they might have done the same thing 5 years later, which would be way worse than doing it in high school. So I think that going through those experiences, no matter what side you're on, is better. And I don't think that it should happen, but it does help you persevere.
Yeah. So that moment puts you on the map. Now, you know, I started following you on Twitter. All these people are following you. Suddenly your voice is being heard. Were you immediately involved in more activism after that, or because then you had an interesting phase of like sort of, I could tell you were like very frustrated with politics at times, and you were pissed at your own side a lot, and you know, and Trump and all that. Flashing forward a little bit later, but what was the next step? Let's just get us to where you're at now.
Yeah, so I think I dealt with so much negative political experiences, so many negative political experiences, that I wanted to do something positive. And I was sick of the partisan bickering on both sides. You know, I have not really changed any of my beliefs. I think both sides have just gone further and further away from the middle, which is frustrating. So I actually took a year hiatus in high school, my senior year, just to enjoy school and enjoy my friends and kind of graduate with a fun last experience. But I couldn't really stay away as long as I had hoped. I was thinking that I could probably stay away through college as well.
Yeah.
But I had seen so many negative things that there needed to be something done that was positive. And I was so, you know, again, sick of the partisan bickering that I wanted to get involved in something that would benefit society and have a decent dialogue, and wouldn't generate complete hate from both sides. And I think that we need more of that in politics, a decent dialogue. And if it has to happen on an easy issue like the environment, which is what I focus on, then so be it. But I would hope that could transfer over to really hotly contested issues too, like gun control or immigration, right?
By the way, I would argue that actually talking about the environment can be perhaps the most hotly contested, because anytime I've done anything on climate on this show, the amount of hate is bananas on both sides.
Right.
So of course it shouldn't be, right? We are all living on this planet Earth. So
and I think we all care about it, at least I hope, or the vast majority of us.
It's a matter of what you think is the best way to care about it. But okay, so we're going to get to all your work
and that's
on
what
that.
That's what the dialogue should be about, is how we all care about it. But let's talk about the different solutions.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get to the solutions and what you're doing now, what else? I think when people see a young conservative, there's still a piece of them that they don't know what to make sense of that. How would you describe conservatism in 2018? You gave me a little bit of sort of what your initial thoughts on it were when you were 10. But right now, what do you make of just sort of the state of conservatism?
I think that it's in a pretty tough spot. I think that what we've done as a movement is just gone to everything that's anti-left. And I don't think that that's how it should be. And I don't think that it's conservative. I think a lot of the principles, I could go issue by issue, but there are a lot of principles that I don't think are necessarily conservative that are being pushed forward now. Like I think that there are some things that Ronald Reagan wouldn't support in today's time, and I actually don't think that he'd be successful as a conservative in today's world. I think people would see him as too moderate, too wishy-washy, when actually he's the token conservative, right? And I think that is frustrating. And I think on the environment and every other issue, the conservative goal is to be anti-Hillary, anti-Bernie, anti-left. And sometimes we forget to do our own solution, and sometimes we just go to the exact opposite end of the spectrum, which is just as dangerous as whatever the far left is proposing. Yeah. So I think that that's where conservatism is now, and I think that is dangerous, because if it keeps going down that path, I think the first party to start realizing that they're just going further and further away from the truth and the middle the first one to realize that and change course is going to have a lot of success. And I hope that conservatives can realize that and start to come back to what conservatism truly is, which is free markets, limited government. It's not just bashing the left, it's trying to work with them if you can. and it's not always a far-right policy that's going to be the answer. And
Yeah.
I think that what conservatism was in 2008 or 2012 isn't exactly ideal, but it's closer to where it should be than it is today. And I'm not saying Trump's to blame. I think it's just a huge movement that has been sick of the left for so long and sick of the radicalism of the left that they've done the exact same. And I think if we could just actually stay true to our morals and take the higher ground, I think that it would be a lot better for the country.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you describe that whichever one stops first.
Yeah.
Because in my view, and it's funny because we come at this from different places, right?
Yeah.
Like I was a card-carrying lefty progressive liberal. I'm obviously a little older than you, but you came at it from the other side. And it's like, for me, the stuff that I focus on, I've just seen the left implode.
Yep.
And if anything, I would say it's basically like a train that the brakes are off.
I
They
agree.
know the cliff is coming, but they're just going to keep going and going and going and keep pouring coal on it, and let's go off the cliff and see what happens.
Don't mention coal to the left.
And yeah, exactly. But to me, that's what I've seen there, and I really spent a lot of my life, at least these last couple of years, trying to correct that. Mm-hmm. Okay, what I do see, and I think maybe you agree, but maybe not, is I do see more fertile ground on the right for ideas. That I can now go to libertarian events and conservative events, and they hear my differences, and they're willing to hear them out, where I see virtually none of that on the left. Do you think that's a fair estimation, even though I know you're concerned, obviously, about what's happening on the fringes of the right?
I do to a certain degree. I think that there is more, and I think it's a relative statement. I don't think that it's enough. I don't think it's anywhere near enough. I think a perfect example is that any conservative that doesn't agree with Trump 100% of the time is kind of shunned. Mm-hmm. You look at an event like CPAC or how the RNC looks at things or something like that, and I think that what they should be doing is embracing people of all ideologies that come from the conservative perspective. And I think when it comes to young people, not every young person is gung-ho for Trump. Not every young person is gung-ho for a wall or whatever it may be. Yeah. And I think that conservatives need to embrace the diversity more on a leadership level. I think like on college campuses, like the college Republicans tend to be more open. Mm-hmm. And I think even like a county party would be more open to different views. Obviously, I don't know every county party in the millions of counties that we have here, but the fact of the matter is I think that the national landscape, or at least the national leaders, are currently unlikely to care about what the moderates think or what even a typical conservative thinks if they're not 100% in agreement. Mm-hmm. And again, I think conferences kind of show that, like the CPAC conference. And I think and that's been an issue going on for years. I mean, the log cabin Republicans were banned from CPAC for I don't know how many years, 6 years. And I think that we just need to diversify the party, and that's going to include non-Christians. It's going to include LGBTQ people. It's going to include minorities, and it's going to include women. And that's going to be the future of the Conservative Party, along with the support that we have now. Otherwise, we're going to be going down a very wrong track record, and if we keep shaming all those people, it's going to be tough.
What part of you doesn't say you're a libertarian? Because I think I know so much about what your ideas are, and you're trying to build all those bridges. I can give you a libertarian reason for why all of those people obviously should be included in a conservative party or any party. Is there anything about libertarian, or do you just not, or is it you're just doing a little political realism, which I hear from a lot of people, is like, I'm a libertarian, but the conservatives and the Republicans are the party that I can work with most to get those ideas.
I think that that's what you just said is probably the best answer I have. The other thing that I would say is, I think that I disagree with libertarians sometimes on the level of government that should be involved. I'm still a limited government person. I also think myself as like a Reagan conservative, but Reagan wasn't anti-government in a lot of ways. He increased spending sometimes. He did taxes when it was necessary. Again, I'm limited government, and when spending's not possible, we should never pursue spending if it can be avoided. Same with taxes and everything like that. But I also don't think that it's completely off the table, which some libertarians do, not all. Yeah. But I think that I probably, issues-wise, agree more with libertarians, especially on social things, maybe even immigration. But I think on some of the overarching government involvement, I think the government does have a place in some things, but it should be trying to help the people instead of push things on the people, which I think is something that maybe makes me a little bit more moderate.